Welcome to Tackling Tech. Introduce yourself.
Introduce myself. My name is Jordan Benzing. I am a Microsoft MVP in the security space, specifically in the subdiscipline for Intune.
Yes. So ever since I've known you, you have been deep in security because some of the companies you worked for, you were like frontline, heading out to customer sites, helping them solve their vulnerabilities and stuff like that.
Sometimes helping them figure out what to do after they'd already been hit by said vulnerability and rebuilding them from what they didn't exist anymore.
Yes. So we won't name the companies, but I know exactly what you've been doing. So now you're doing even more security work.
Yeah.
Right?
So today I actually work internally. I manage internal and external security and infrastructure, as well as the compliance component for another company.
Another company, right. So let's talk about like Windows security.
Sure.
What are your thoughts? What can you tell us, like where we are with it?
And security is an interesting challenge today. Ever since the world went remote, basically, with the world going towards remote, with financial things shifting as well around what's important and what's not important, it's just gotten harder. Everybody's being asked and expected with how fast technology has advanced to do more with less.
More with less, yes.
Always, constantly. I keep hearing this over and over. I go to a lot of these, what are called cybersecurity summits. And one of the constant recurring themes that I hear is, hey, we need you to do more things, but we aren't going to give you more budget.
Yes.
It's a never-ending cycle. They want people to be able to just find different ways to manage stuff and something. The other thing is that I'm hearing a lot about from different vendors is the talent pool is starting to shift a lot. So one of the things that people are talking about, you used to have this thing, I'm going to name one of those products, that wonderful thing called Config Manager, right?
Sure.
One of the things that we've seen a lot, even in the Config Manager side of things, never mind the security side of things, the Config Manager side of things, the talent is starting to move and shift around in terms of like who does things. No Config Manager admin ever was, I'm the Config Manager admin by virtue of the previous guy left, and now I got to figure out how to work this tool thing. The same thing is starting to happen in security as people move into the cloud security space.
Yeah.
So now we have this gap that's starting to build for small to medium-sized businesses that haven't moved towards cloud security, that aren't focused in or don't know what how to protect their environment, things like that. But all of a sudden, they've got to figure out how to fill that gap. And they're starting to do it with tools a lot of the time. But the biggest thing that people don't fully seem to be shoving down is this culture. So security starts all the way at the bottom of an org, as well as at the top of an org.
Right.
That's the other part. If you don't get executive buy-in, that's a problem, right?
That's a problem, yeah.
But if you don't get the culture of people taking accountability, that everyone is responsible, everybody in a company is part of the security team indirectly in some way, shape, or form. Phishing attacks are getting more complex. AI is massively problematic around phishing attacks today, as well as the complexity and more the empowerment of different types of internet are allowing the attackers themselves to build better connections, better communications, to allow the threats themselves to become more sophisticated as a result. So there's been a massive shift in terms of where they're almost businesses. They are businesses at times that are starting to get built out there. So it's been very interesting to see the collective thing, and especially see around how can we do better? And so one of the things that's become more and more apparent is, the simple way is stay up to date.
Yeah.
That means moving from, I'm going to say this ugly word, Windows 7 to Windows 11, right?
Sure.
Or moving from Windows 10 into the Windows 11 space where you can get better controls around it. It means things like thinking about identity first as a service, starting to think of your machines even at times as commodities, right? Machines are important. We should try to protect them. Absolutely. They are one of the things that comes in place. But the identity of the person logging in and its validation is way more important because they can log in from anything.
A lot more at risk with that, right?
Way more at risk, too.
Way more risk, yeah.
And so if you can start to think of your machines as like, if I have to throw this machine away, if I have to burn it down tomorrow, it's fine, right? What that also should mean to you, if you can get that mindset around your head, is it doesn't matter whether I'm running Windows 10 or Windows whatever, because the next time if I throw this away, I'm going to run on whatever newest, latest, greatest, highest patch level that I possibly can.
Right.
Obviously, there are industries that doesn't always work for. People in certain types of healthcare and things like that, they have lots of controls in place. But if you can move that mindset to disposable infrastructure to a degree, disposable desktops, like, this is useless, throw it away, right?
Right.
Because machine cycles for a lot of companies are 3 and 4 years anyways.
Yeah.
Right? And so getting used to that and upgrading and moving forward is the way for the most part going forward now.
Right. So the couple of things you hit, resonates with me as well. One is the talent pool.
Yeah.
Right. That is a big issue. It seems like you said, it's very true. It's shifting over to different areas now. So not only is shifting, you also have lower skill sets and the industry. Like how do we train these people up? How do we educate them? What do they need to do to skill up? Right? The technologies have become so much more powerful, so much more robust, and there's so much to learn about it, right? AI and Copilot and things like that. So that was one. The other one was, I really like what you said about companies, hey, we don't have the budget. We don't have a budget, blah, blah, blah. So they do bare minimum.
Yep.
But the very funny thing is, whenever the same companies get hit with a cybersecurity issue, attack, then all of a sudden the money pops up.
I can tell you a little bit about that.
Right.
Some of that comes in routes, and this is why it's becoming harder and harder, both as a vendor and as well as a customer, is actually from cyber insurance. So, and insurance companies have been making it way harder now to get those policies. That money, a lot of the time, to suddenly revamp and upskill your security program comes from this influx of cash to a degree around insurance coming in. Okay. And all of a sudden, now you can afford to rebuild it because not only can you afford to, you have to. And a lot of times, as part of those insurance policies, even sometimes, there are requirements that if you do get hit, you have to demonstrate a certain level of how much you've improved and things like that afterwards, or your insurance premiums go up. So it's starting to become there's different ways and things of teeth that are in those clauses and are in those things.
Yeah, so I'm seeing also, I've heard about the whole insurance industry driving the security posture of organizations. Like they're doing audits.
Yep.
Have you guys implemented? Yeah. You want to sign up for insurance, but what do you have in place?
So that's actually an interesting thing that not a lot of companies think about. Okay. So SOC 2 Type 2, which is the big common thing that a lot of vendors get asked for, or the different companies get asked for from a perspective. Mm-hmm. That is not actually maintained necessarily by a security firm. It's actually maintained by the American I can't remember the acronym, but it's an American accounting. It's a CPA firm. It's an actual big accounting firm. And part of this is that it's around the risk business model financial component of it to a degree. So absolutely there are technical controls in there. Absolutely there's information in there around things that you should look at, consider, and stuff like that.
Yep.
But part of the reason why it's been so successful in its adoption from a business perspective, right, is it's something that a business has recommended and helps businesses look at it and understand it from a business risk model for them that they're familiar with. Not necessarily a security first implementation or a Microsoft baseline model, right? So it's an interesting balance that started to pop up there, or tip in scale that started to pop up there.
Yeah. So now let's get into Windows 11 and Intune.
Yeah.
Okay. So security, and again we have the 2025 is coming up, right?
Yep.
And we're trying to, Microsoft is definitely trying to, hey, get on board, start now, get going, let us help you out, things like that. I also see some pushbacks, right? From, I'm not sure whether it's old school mentality of IT admins or things like that, or we want to wait for the next version over and stuff. But Windows 11 already has a lot of awesome security features right from the box, right? So what do you have to say to people about that?
Oh man, the Windows 11 conversation is fun. It's interesting. There are some conundrums that are interesting in here. So I'll talk first about why people should, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the resistance to change.
Perfect. Let's do that.
I think from a perspective of why people should, it is the current latest, greatest from a Defender perspective, from an integration into the OS and into the kernel perspective. Windows 10 also did that, but Windows 11 has taken that even a step further for it. The other components about it that I think about a lot of the time is that there's been some re-architecture to how different things start behind the scenes, especially from File Explorer and stuff like that. That makes the experience a little bit better.
Okay.
And it's much more focused, or starting to get more focused on that cloud identity component as you are browsing and using the machine itself. A lot of the M365 Intune components feel much more and are much more native inside of the OS to create a more better unified experience than it did in 10. I have way less issues with things like, I'm sorry, OneNote team. Like I have way less issues with like the weird OneNotes happening all over the place with like, you have like 3 different versions.
Yes, the desktop version. The
exactly.
Yeah.
It's much more unified like that. I think,
it's perfect,
we saw recently, I think I saw yesterday on Twitter, is the Teams experience is going to continue to get better now. We're going to start unifying those together. I think I just saw that yesterday on Twitter.
Yeah.
And like, there's just a lot of continuing development in this space there.
Right.
Also, the update experience has gotten much better in Windows 11. I can't remember the last like really wonky update that I've had, other than like the Winter E thing. That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole different thing. Yeah.
But, like that's not a Windows problem. That's just things are a weird problem. But like the update experience, the experience of using it has just been pretty good.
Yeah.
As far as
conundrums
that people find themselves in, I do think, and I agree with you, there is some legacy mindset that's lingering there for it. That's absolutely a thing. I don't like the word legacy sometimes. Legacy, it's always one of those things. It feels like it's a tool that's used to like browbeat people into like, well, you're just bad because you're using legacy. It's old.
Using
it's
old
like,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. Like I don't like that word, but like there is some mindset of I'm not ready to shift to the future. Change is hard. Motivating change is hard. You moved my cheese. If you've never read that book, it's a great book, right? On that. What's really interesting to me, though, from a true conundrum perspective, is data privacy and sovereignty.
Okay.
Now, Microsoft does a fantastic job with their conversations on telemetry and what they're doing and how they're doing it. What's challenging for small to medium businesses is understanding things like, for example, we've talked about some stuff like Copilot or things like that, or like that's coming alongside in the OS and things like that, or the Windows search engine, or things like that. People are using this at home. But when it comes to businesses, when it comes to data privacy and things like that, depending on where you are, this is a very interesting challenge, okay, that I'm gonna lay out here for you. There are contracts that when you sign a contract with somebody, sometimes they say, you can't put our data into a large language model.
True.
Period. At all. What that then can potentially mean, depending on how far you take that out and extrapolate that out, if I have an email with you, and let's say that you're Johnny Tambourine down the street who is a customer or whatever, and you tell me I can't do that, right? And one of those solutions sees that because it's natively imbibed to the OS. Have I just violated that contract?
Okay.
So this is a weird challenge conundrum that people are starting to think through. Is this like, as data sovereignty laws come up, AI is so new, and we haven't even begun to see the good things from it, the bad things from it, the regulation that's going to come about from it, that people just don't know. And it's right at that edge, right? Of like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what GDPR is going to tell me about this.
The same thing was with cloud. I was having a conversation with another IT pro, and he said, when the word cloud came out years ago, everybody was like, what the heck is this? But now it's like an everyday thing, right? So same thing with AI. Eventually, it's here to stay.
It's it's already here to stay. Let's be honest. Like it's already here to stay, right? And it's going to be pervasive through things.
Yes.
But there's going to be this feeling of loss of control of our guardrails around things like this. I'm going to just kind of reference some stuff here. Like there's very interesting data privacy laws. And I absolutely agree. Like we can do lots of stuff to make the data very secure, make the data very private and things like that. But people have to come to terms with what that means for them first. For some countries, like I'm going to bring up fancy words here, like
Europe, right?
GDPR. Germany has some other ones. The UK has their own subset. Australia as well has its own subset. And so from a vendor perspective, especially from a customer and vendor perspective, it's going to be a difficult conversation to navigate because no one's built the framework yet of how to have the conversation.
How do you keep track of all these different data privacy laws and stuff? Like you said, California and this and that. Like if you're a vendor or an organization.
Somebody should write an AI for that.
Probably.
Yeah. Like it's hard, right?
Yeah,
so
hard.
compliance from a security perspective is hard. One of the biggest things, I brought this up actually recently on stage. We have this critical mass problem that we're going to hit here very soon here. And I hope that this is something that AI can solve for us, okay? A lot of the times, if I was to go to you and I was to come to Microsoft, okay, I'm just going to pick on you now for a second here. If I come to Microsoft and I say, Microsoft, tell me every single piece of open source technology that you use and every single piece of software that you use in your entire environment. The odds of you giving me an answer are probably non-existent, shall we say, right? Like people are asking that question. They want to know what OSS are you using, what other third parties are using, what are your What are your fourth parties? As we build this web, this complicated web that starts here, the communication pattern for that grows exponentially. So if I'm a vendor, I now have or a customer, right? If I'm a customer, I now have to build out a team that has to track every single piece of software. If I have 50 pieces of software, and I've yet to meet an organization that only has 50 pieces of software on their device. It just doesn't happen very often, right?
It's more than that.
Let's say that you've got 50 pieces of software. Every single one of those 50 pieces of software has at least 2 other like pieces of software, anything like that. And those 2 other things that they have probably have other dependencies. So how do we, as vendors, when we're producing software, right, induce trust to trust the solution? Now, these questions started coming up from things where there have been different supply chain attacks and things like that. And companies are having to build and spend so much money on this. And not only that, but now it's becoming a drain where vendors have to answer that question, right?
Yes.
So now they have to build these 2 different tools. And they're spending time for us that we could be spending on doing security or doing the practical work or migrations to the next big thing or moving that elephant, right? Moving the cheese towards how do we get towards repeatable, sustainable growth of like, I was on Windows 11 today, I'm going to be on the next version tomorrow, the next version, the next version, the next version.
Right. When we were having an offline conversation and you had mentioned, because you're traveling, and you're going to security conferences and stuff like that. And one of the interesting things you mentioned that there was some disconnect with Intune security. And can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I've noticed a lot lately, I've been going to these things that are called cybersecurity summits. And I ask these questions. I've asked these questions before a lot of time. I run into these directors as well of lots and lots of small, medium, large businesses there. And one of the questions I ask them a lot of the time is, how are you managing your device today? Are you using Intune? Are you using Config Manager? Are you using WSUS? Are you using, what are you using? And they go, no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. And not only that, but there is this weird tension of wanting to stick tools in from a security perspective instead of thinking about the base thing that we use every day. It'd almost be like if you were a construction worker, right? And you have a hammer. Use your hammer every single day, right? You walk on and you pick up your hammer every single day. Well, you'd probably want to know a lot about that hammer, right? You'd probably want to make sure that your hammer is carefully cleaned, put away, and well maintained, and everything like that. And if instead of doing that, it'd be like you bought security cameras to try and track where your hammer was and put them around, right?
Okay.
Like that doesn't help if you don't actually know how to use the hammer in the first place, and if the cameras are in the wrong spot where they don't see the hammer, or where you put it down, or where you left it last, or this, that, or the other thing.
So they don't know that they already have the tools.
They don't know that they have the hammer and what to do with it. Yeah.
And so there's also a disconnect between their IT department and leadership.
Yep.
And either they're not asking the right questions or
or even disconnects between IT teams and security teams.
Yes, I've seen that too in the past and stuff like that. And security team will try to dictate, you can only patch, A, B, and C, but you can't do anything else. But when the other stuff is also very important, so that's very interesting to see that. So it is pretty widespread.
It's widespread. It is not just something that you see at like the onesie-twosie companies that you go into. If you've ever been a consultant, you go in and you're like, this, they have some challenges here and this and the other thing, and then you move on. The next company's pretty good, and you're like, maybe this isn't a widespread problem, right? No, it's very much. So
how do we fix this? How do we solve this or get, bring it much more closer?
Man, there's 2 things I think. There's 2 things I think a lot about on this. Is that security both starts at the top and it starts at the bottom.
Yeah.
And there's 2 components. This is one, you have to get leadership to be all the way bought in. They have to be bought in that we have to spend time, effort, and training on people.
But who's telling them that though?
Right. But that's the thing, right? They have to be committed to time and people. And actually, I've used this example before, a lot of the time. Like one of the things I think that's very interesting that Satya's actually talked about before, right? Even is the importance of people in an organization and empowering them to make the right decisions and upskilling them to make the decisions, right? The people. It is a scaling problem. Security is a problem of scale, basically. If we can't get our frontline workers, our regular everyday people who are here, as part of the paradigm, we will not win.
Well said. Yes.
We will not win.
Yeah.
Attackers have to win once. We have to win 100% of the time. They
Yes.
only have to win once.
Yes.
And so if we can't get people to understand what a link that they shouldn't click is, and what they should or shouldn't be doing in their email, or why they shouldn't browse to websites, or why they shouldn't install random software from the internet that they've never heard of, even though it might improve their life in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Why it might be dangerous, why it might be bad.
Right.
If we can't do that and bring them along on the journey, and I don't mean that from a sense of total control of like, thou shalt not do, because that just creates people wanting to figure out ways to get around the system in the first place.
Yeah.
But if we can educate them, upskill them, show them the risks, and get them bought in,
Exactly.
that's a different story.
Exactly. I've been like, I speak to many IT pros like yourself and stuff. Some of them, when I'm having this conversation, especially like Windows 11 and stuff comes up. Why not? Whatever. And it's like, oh, our end users will have an issue. Oh, end users, it's a big change. And then when you talk to other people, they're like, end users is not a problem. They don't complain as much as IT pros claim they do, right? Why don't we just empower them, give them the tools to learn, to train up, and they will be our advocates. So like, hey, I found an issue,
Yeah. All right, so now you're getting into the stuff that I really like to talk about. So I grew up in a very rural community.
Yeah.
Incredibly rural. It's mostly farmland where I live. There's nothing out there. And so the education around technology, I grew up using crummy Windows 7 machines in a library and Windows XP machines in a library, right? Like that was it. We barely had a home computer for most of it. Like I had dial-up where I lived, like I still.
I know, I know you have a
that's a whole other, but the level of exposure in certain communities to things for technology and stuff like that, and not just the level of exposure, but the early training on how to use that technology in a way that follows you into the professional world outside of, and now you're going to go click on a word and you're going to learn how to type and things like that in the education system is problematic.
Yeah.
It's very problematic.
Very
We have
problematic.
lots of things like little programs like Code Ninjas and this, that, and the other thing. Those are great if you have people to take advantage of them, and if you live in a place and you have time and effort that you can take advantage and learn that. It's great. But right now we have a long-term workforce. We have this big chunk of our workforce right now that's not that major, that they grew up a lot like I did, right? And now I got very fortunate when I went on to college, right? And I just happened to be a broken human being that liked to play video games, and I like to modify my video games. And so, that's how I ended up in IT.
Yeah.
But if you didn't do that, right? If you didn't go through that, you didn't have those experiences, you just went to college and you wrote papers, or you went and you did this and this and the other thing. When you get to the workforce, so if your tech doesn't work at the end of the day, what's the first thing you should do? Call IT.
I'll call IT, yeah.
That's what you do. You do that. And so I understand the conundrum that the IT pros find themselves in, right? Because they feel the victim, effectively. Yeah. And so if we can get them bought in, right, to figure out how to do the training and figure out how to do those things, empower them to do that, give them resources to do that. Again, this is a constrained resources problem too, right?
Yeah.
Is that how do we empower people to train and showcase? One of the coolest things at times, I think is interesting, okay, is when you buy a new SaaS solution, right? When you buy any of these new SaaS solutions, I think you get it even too when you first log into some of the M365 apps the first time. I think it's only when you first set up your account though. Okay. You start seeing these little like bubble tooltips that are like one-time tooltips, right?
Yes,
you know what I'm talking about,
yes,
right?
I know what you're talking about.
Wouldn't it be cool if the first time you logged with the machine, you could say, I'm a new user or I'm an old user, I've used this before, click the button and you got like a 5-minute like, hey, we've moved this over here, a walkthrough change of like, this is what's changed.
That's a very good feedback.
And this is how we've made it better, right? We've heard your feedback that this was annoying and we've done this instead. We know that this is kind of this. We know this is a visual change. We've put it here because we've seen a bigger ultra-wide monitors, and we think that this is why your start menu should be in the middle now, right? Because, and that's the thing, right? Is that I'm picking on start menus here because
no, it's valid.
Like because it's one of my biggest pet peeves, shall we say, is when people talk about like moving the start menu like that. The last time I clicked the start menu button was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't. I hit the Windows key. I hit the Windows key.
That's what I do.
I hit the Windows key and start typing what I want, right?
Exactly.
What if you taught somebody instead of like, hey, by the way, we've moved this over here, but we also like to give you a tip. Did you know that if you just hit the Windows key and start typing for what you want, you'd find it, right? Like, wouldn't that be a cool, empowering journey together instead of like, and also giving people the why, giving the IT admins the why.
I had this exact same conversation with another guy.
Yeah.
And we talked about the start menu. And I'm like, listen, Windows 11 came about during COVID, right? work from home went full swing, people started having massive
Ultra wides.
ultra wides. If you had the start menu on the left, that's like really far. It's not going to be productive.
Not only is it not productive, but it's physically damaging.
Yeah.
If you actually sit at your computer and you're forced every time to go to the start menu to do this is actually negative on the orthotics and like your neck and spine over time, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it's actually one of the cool things, and I'm going to shameless mention here of like Macs. They put the spotlight menu. If you do the same search thing where you hit the GUI key or the Windows key or the Mac key, they put it right here in the middle of your ultra wide monitor. It's always right here to type to search, right?
I see. Okay.
So when you hit the action button, the same way as like if you hit the Windows key on Windows, your start menu pops up, and at the top you'll notice that your search bar, if you start typing, is right at the top.
Already there.
It's like here for Mac, and it's like here for Windows. They're just a little bit different in terms of height for them. It's a very good orthotics design. The problem is we don't motivate our users or our IT people with the why of the change.
The why of the change.
Why did it change, right? It's not so much that it changed, right? It's, hey, we're making this change and here's why it's changing, right? Get us to buy that.
It's not that it's we created something new that's shiny and whatever, but there's a reason for it, right?
We want to improve your life. We want to empower you to do more.
One of the things that I've pushed a lot from a Microsoft side is the accessibility features.
Yeah.
They're amazing in Windows 11. And it's not just for people who are, disabled or anything like that. It's for everybody.
Yeah. The number of times that I use, I think it's Windows, I can't even remember what it is. I think it's Windows key H for stuff like that. When I've got like coffee or I have something else in my hand or I have a dog in one hand to type.
Yes.
I love activating voice to text. It's
and
great.
They're getting better and better and better. It's like trying to educate people on that. That's why I try to do a lot of like presentations about it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You hit everything on the nail here. I love this. Great interview, great discussion. Thanks, Jordan.
Pleasure talking with you. As always, Harjit.
That's Jordan Benzing. How do people find you?
You can find me on X, or previously Twitter, at Jordan the IT Guy. I'm at Jordan the IT Guy. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Jordan Benzing, you can find me there. And you can find me pretty much anywhere under the Jordan the IT Guy handle. Pretty much pick your social platform, and that's probably what I'm called.
There you go. Thanks for watching. Cheers.
Cheers.